And welcome to the historic and the iconic KiMo Theatre. My name is Paul Swotze. I have the honor today to introduce this concert event and our guest musician and historian, Steve Cormier. This year, the KiMo is celebrating its 90th anniversary as a unique Pueblo Indian Art Deco style landmark in downtown Albuquerque. The theater was opened with grand festivities on September 19, 1927, and for decades was a premier movie and vaudeville palace downtown. When the city greatly expanded into the Northeast Heights in the 1960s and 1970s, and big businesses like Sears and Penny's moved to the malls, some of you will remember that, movie businesses downtown began to suffer. The KiMo went dark and went up for sale. Wisely and thankfully, the city of Albuquerque purchased the KiMo in 1977 and saved it from demolition. Since then, the citizens of Albuquerque and its city council have approved several physical restoration and technical renovation projects. In 2011, the restoration continued with the placement of a replica of the KiMo's early neon front marquee signage. Our KiMo now has the distinction of being honored as a designated city, state, and national register landmark. And so this landmark theater has been saved, and we really are lucky to enjoy a concert performance here today. Look around. What a stylish and chanting venue. Let's hear it for the KiMo, king of its kind. Now about this special event. Of importance, this free event is made possible through a funding partnership between the KiMo, the New Mexico Humanities Council, the New Mexico Department of Cultural Affairs, and the National Endowment for the Humanities. Our title sponsor for the 90th anniversary, the Albuquerque Journal, has publicized this concert. Thank you. The New Mexico chapter of the Western Music Association has promoted this Songs and Stories Humanities event to its membership. Thank you. Please check today's playbill and the KiMo Tickets website in the weeks and months ahead for more free anniversary events. We want you to join in the fun. Our musician and storyteller today, Dr. Steve Cormier, PhD, is himself an extraordinary individual with a fascinating career history. From 1979 to 1988, Steve actually lived as a day work farm and ranch hand in Flint Hills of Kansas and in and around Santa Rosa and Fort Sumner, New Mexico. He competed in rodeos. Steve has studied Western ranch history and ranch music and earned a PhD in American Studies from UNM. Steve has taught history at CNM in Albuquerque. He has performed over the years as a supporting TV and film actor in such productions as Gunsmoke and Wyatt Earp. He has released 6 recordings of traditional Western music and his own cowboy compositions. His latest CD is titled Bucking Off, and all his CDs are on sale in the lobby today. He is happy to autograph his CDs for his fans after the concert today. This spring, Steve is spending much of his professional energy on extended concert tours with his music and stories. After his concert today, he is preparing to leave for a tour of Western Canada, 10 concerts in 12 days. He's a busy cowboy. And now, an end to introductions. Please help me welcome to the stage our talented performer. Say howdy, howdy to Steve Cormier. Howdy, howdy, applause.
Welcome. I driving in today, and I admit I was going faster than I should have, and I got pulled over by a deputy sheriff. And he walked up to my car and tapped on the window, and I rolled my window down. He said, "I'd like to see your driver's license, sir." And I says to him, "I don't have one." And then he said, "Well, let me see your vehicle registration." And I says to him, "I don't have any vehicle registration." He said, "Don't you go anywhere." So he goes back to his car and he calls him back up, no less. And real fast, another deputy sheriff shows up. This guy's a sergeant. And they confer. Conferring is a cowboy term, by the way. It means talking when you can't hear. And the sergeant then comes to my car and taps on my window like that. I roll my window down. He said, "Sir, can I see your driver's license?" And I said, "Sure." And I reached in my billfold, took my driver's license out and gave it to him. "Oh, okay." And he said, "Can I please see your vehicle registration?" And I said, "Of course." And I reached in the glove compartment, took out the vehicle registration and gave it to him. Now he's got this perplexed look on his face. And he said, "Sir, the officer said that you didn't have a driver's license and you didn't have a vehicle registration." And I says to him, "I suppose he also told you I was speeding." Repeats where the yellow jack pine grows tall. Buster Jigs and Sagebrush Sam had a roundup away last fall. Any old calf with lop long ears that didn't push up by date got his long ears chiseled and his old hide sizzled in a most artistic way. Said Buster Jigs to Sagebrush Sam as he swelled his long leg down, "I'm getting tired of cowography, I reckon I'll jog to town." They started out at a right smart lope, for there were no sight of a ride. And them was the days when a good cow punch could ile up his insides. The old Kentucky bar, they stopped at the end of a whiskey roll, and they wound up tight sometime that night, some 40 drinks below. And the house turned round, stood 'em up, started them the other way. Honest to goodness, tell you the truth now, the boys got juice that day. Up a darn good load, and who should they meet but the devil himself come prancing down the road. "Confound you ornery cowboy skunks, you better go hunt your holes, for I am the devil from Hell's Rim Rock, come together and up your souls." "Well, the devil be damned," said Buster, "the boys both know we're tight, but before you corral any cowboy souls, you're gonna have one beautiful fight." And he throwed his rope, throwed her straight, she spun down good and true. And he took the devil by his pointed horns, and he looped his delis too. Now Sagebrush Sam was a lariat man with his gut line coiled up neat, and he built him a hole and played her out fair, and he took the devil's hind feet. They stretched him out, they laid him down while the sizzling iron grew hot, and they trimmed his horn with a dehorn saw, and they branded him up a lot. Now they tied 10 knots in the old boy's tail, and they left him there for a joke, with the biller and cough as they loped right off, necked up to a blackjack coat. If you ever go riding in the Syrie Peaks, you hear one hell of a wail. He'll know it's the devil as he yells and growls at the knots tied in his tail. Thank you. Now, I've been singing this stuff before airbags on cars. That's the only thing I'm gonna tell you about it. And cowboy work and music, cowgirl work music is nothing more than the human condition Western version, which means that it's about love and hate, mom, horses, cattle, things like that. Pranks, playing pranks, songs about that. Songs about greenhorns. And excuse me, I'm going to do one for you about a greenhorn. This is a traditional thing from the 1880s. And here's the backstory, so to speak, on this deal. These cowboys are sitting around a campfire, almost Hollywoodish, you know. And into camp walks a guy. He just walks in, which is, you know, not something that happens all the time. And he wants to borrow a horse. And they look at him, and he's got greenhorn and city slicker written all over him. You know, I mean, there's like 3 things that indicate to people that he's a city slicker, greenhorn type. One is that he's wearing a 3-piece suit, okay? The other, he's wearing Brogan shoes. And then the third thing, the third indicator is he's speaking in complete sentences. And he addresses them. He says, "Excuse me, sons of the soil. Is it possible, perchance, to borrow of the equine species, the purpose of which is to perambulate down semi-macadam road yon to perhaps gain employment at the next rancho?" Got a greenhorn. So Shorty, who's the smart aleck of the group, gets his lariat out and builds a loop, and he goes to the remuda, the horse herd. And he ropes the zebra dun, pulls the zebra dun out of the horse herd. Now, I rodeoed for about 2.5 years, and I rode bareback horses, and some of the toughest horses I ever had were the ones that would stand placidly in the chute and let you put your rigging on them, and then the gate would open and all hell would break loose. By the way, about my rodeo career, I was just good enough to know I wasn't good enough, if you know what I mean. Anyway, so that's what the dun is. He's like an old campaign rodeo horse. He'll let you saddle him, okay? And that's it. So anyway, this is, like I said, this is from the 1880s. We were camped upon the plains at the head of the Cimarron. When along come a stranger and he stopped to argue some. He looked so very foolish we began to look around. Thought he was a greenhorn just escaped from town. Now we asked if he'd had breakfast and he hadn't had a smear. So we opened up the chuck box and bid him take his share. He took a cup of coffee and some bacon and some beans, and then began to talk about them foreign kings and queens. Well, about the Spanish War and the fighting on the sea, with guns as big as steers and ramrods as big as trees, and about Paul Jones, a mean fighting son of a gun, about the orneriest cuss ever pulled a gun. Now such an educated fella, his thoughts just run in herds, and he astonished all us cowboys with them jaw-breaking words. He just kept on talking till he made the boys all sick. And we began to look around how to play a trick. I said he'd lost his job upon the Santa Fe, and he was going across the plains just to strike the 7D. Didn't say how come he had some trouble with the boss. Said he liked to borrow a nice fat saddle horse. Now this tickled all the boys to death, and we laughed down in our sleeves. Oh, we'll give you a horse nice and fat as you please. And Shorty grabbed the lariat and roped the zebra dun. Handed to the stranger just waiting for the fun. Now old Dunn was an outlaw who had grown so very wild, and he could paw the white out of the moon and jump for a mile. But he stood so very silent as though he didn't know, till he was saddled and ready for to go. And when the stranger hit the saddle, old Dunn quit the earth, traveled right straight up for all he was worth, pitching and squalling and having wall-eyed fits, the hind feet perpendicular, the front ones in the bits. Now you could see the tops of mountains under Dunn at every jump, but the stranger, he was growed there like a camel's hump. Stranger sat upon him and twirled his black mustache like a summer boarder just waiting for his hash. Now he thumped him in the shoulders and he spurred him when he whirled, just to show them flunky punchers he's the wolf of the world. And when he had dismounted once more upon the ground, we knowed he was a thoroughbred and not a gent from town. Now the boss was standing round taking in of the show. And he walked up to the stranger and he said, you needn't go. You can use a lariat like you rode the zebra dun. You're the man I've been looking for since the year one. Now he could toss a lariat and he didn't do it slow. He'd catch them hind feet 9 out of 10 for any kind of dough. And when the herd stampeded, he was always on the spot. He set 'em to milling just like the boiling of a pot. And it's one thing, it's a sure thing, I know since I've been born. Every educated fella ain't a plum greenhorn. Thank you. Now, those of us who do these old songs owe a big debt to a guy named Jack Thorpe, who collected, I should say, the very first cowboy songbook, and which was published here in New Mexico in Estancia, back when Estancia had both a newspaper, apparently, and a printing press, around 1909, if I remember correctly. And Thorpe was from New York, and his uncles were polo pony enthusiasts. And so they sent Jack Thorpe west here to find polo ponies. And apparently he did, but he fell in love with open range cowboying and he stayed. And worked all over New Mexico, Texas, up the plains. And all the while he was collecting songs. And he didn't collect the tune, but he'd collect the poetry. And this is one of the ones he collected. And I've always thought, I've got a theory where the perfect traditional old-time cowboy song has 7 things in it. What are those, Steve? Okay, thanks for asking. I appreciate it. Cattle, horses, cowboys, mom should be in it. Unrequited love. If the love is getting requited, it's not it's a pop tune and it doesn't count. Religion, God, and then dying. You know, if the guy dies, it makes up for a better song. I mean, obviously it's hard on him, but nevertheless, it makes for a better song. This has most of those things in it. And it's about herding cattle from Texas into New Mexico, and those are the days. This is another one from the 80s, 1880s, when Texans referred to New Mexico as New Mexicans as Mexas. So those of you who know something about New Mexico history know about that. So this is Trail to Mexico. made up my mind in the early days. Leave this country for to stay. No more in Texas to dwell for a while, but to travel west for many a mile. It was in the year of 83. J.H. Humphrey hired me. He said, young man, you are to go and trail my herd into Mexico. It was early in the month of May, when on the trail I started to go. I kissed goodbye with the darling of my heart, said true to me she'd always be. The long and a lonesome go, as the herd moved on to New Mexico, with the music sweet and cowboy song. To New Mexico the herd moved on. Well, we finally got there in New Mexico. Long for my love, but I could not go. So I wrote a letter to my sweetheart dear, but not a word from her did he hear. So I went back home to my once loved home. Called for the darling of my own. Said she'd married for a richer life. Therefore, cowboy, find yourself another life. I'll go back west, God's own land, and hunt my faithful cowboy band, where your friends are few, they're always true. False hearted love I'd forget I knew. False hearted love I'd forget I knew. Thank you. Thorpe was a writer as well. He eventually got himself a ranch near Santa Fe, so he decided to write songs, and he wrote one of the most popular tunes in the 1920s. It's called Little Joe the Wrangler, and he always said it was a true story, that this kid couldn't have been any more than 11 or 12 years old, shows up at a cow camp there in eastern New Mexico, and he's riding an old nag, a horse that really shouldn't be ridden anymore. He stole it from his dad, apparently, which is in the song, and he's in his saddle. This is some of the things you'll hear in the song. He's riding what's called a cack, K-A-C-K, a cack saddle. And that's a saddle, that's a slang term. It's a saddle that should not be ridden. That's how old it is. It's not in very good shape. And he's also wearing brogan shoes. And And he's got one spur. He's only got one spur. And I always thought that was sort of like a metaphor, or apocryphal or something like that. Till I was working for the Mezaki family in Flint Hills, Kansas, long back before airbags on cars. That's how long ago it was. And it was Brandon, it was the spring. And we'd all saddle up and we were riding out. And Bobby Mezaki, the patriarch of the family, I'm riding next to him, and I look down. I just happened to glance down at his right foot, and he doesn't have a spur. I thought, well, maybe he's just not using spurs this morning. I always rode with spurs. I thought, well, I'll just check it out. This is too good not to check out. So I went around to his left side, and sure enough, there's a spur. And I said to him, I said, Bobby, how come you only got one spur on? And I swear to this day he was waiting for someone to ask him. He said, Steve, you get one side going, the other's got to follow. I dare you to argue with that. Was little Joe the wrangler, he wrangled never more. His days at the remuda, they're done. It was a year ago, last April, when he joined the outfit here. Just a little Texas street, all alone. One late in the evening, when he rode up to the camp, a little old brown pony called Chaw, with his brogan shoes and overalls, a harder looking kid you never in your whole life ever saw. His saddle was a southern cack built many years ago, an okay spur from one foot lightly hung, and a hot roll in a cotton sack was loosely tied behind, and a canteen from the saddle horn he'd slung. Said he'd had to leave his home, his daddy'd married twice. His new ma beat him every day or two. So we saddled up old Chaw one night and lit a shuck this way. Said he'd try and paddle now his own canoe. Said he'd try and do the best he could if we'd only give him work. We didn't know straight up about a cow. So the boss caught him out of mount and sort of put him on. We kinda liked that little stray somehow. Taught him how to herd the horses and know them all by name. Get him in for daylight if he could, and follow the chuck wagon and always hitch the team, and help the coast narrow Russellwood. We were camped down by Red River, the weather had been fine, down in the south side of the bend, when a norther commenced blowing and we doubled up our guard, for it took all hands to hold the paddle then. Now little Joe the wrangler, he was called out with the rest. Scarcely had the kid got to the herd Well, the cattle they stampeded like a hailstorm on the flew, with all of us riding for the lead. Between the streaks of lightning, you could see a horse ahead. It was little Joe the Wrangler in the lead. He was riding old Blue Rocket with his slicker above his head, trying to check the leaders in their speed. Well, we finally got a milling and sort of quieted down, and the extra guard back to the camp did go. But one of us was a-missing, and we all knew at a glance it was our little Texas stray, Wrangler Joe. Next morning, just at sunup, we found where Rocket fell, down in a washout 20 foot below. And beneath his horse smashed to a pulp, the spurs that rung the knell was our little Texas stray, Wrangler Joe. Was little Joe the Wrangler, he'll wrangle nevermore. His days at the Remuda, they are done. It was a year ago, last April, when he joined the outfit here. Just a little Texas stray, and all alone. Now, as part of this idea about cowboy music being part, just Western version of the human experience, cowboys get bored and they get, I'm going to put this in parentheses, lonely. Never mind, it was a cheap joke. They want to go into town and commune with the opposite sex, and if they can. And of course, most cowboys I knew just ended up in the bar. That was far, their evening's entertainment. But I'm going to sing you a song about a guy that goes to a high-tone dance in Denver. He's not going to mess with a bar. He wants to go to where the women are wearing clean white dresses. And that's a big step up, So anyway, this guy goes into the bar in Denver to this high-tone dance. Well, you can't expect a cowboy to educate his shanks in etiquette-ish fashion in aristocratic ranks, when he's always been accustomed to shaking heel and toe at them rattling ranchers' dances where much etiquette it don't go. You can bet I set 'em laughing in an astonished sort of way and giving of their squinters in excited sort of play when I happened into Denver and chanced to take a prance in the snoozing easy measures of a high-tone dance. When I got amongst the ladies in their frocks so fleecy white and the dudes togged out in wrappings, they were simply out of sight. Tell you what, I was embarrassed. And I couldn't help but keep from feeling like a burro in a flock of pretty sheep. Every step I took was awkward, and I blushed so bloomin' red, just like the principal decoration on a turkey gobbler's head. Well, the ladies said was seldom they'd ever had the chance to see an old-time puncher at a high-tone dance. And I cut me out a heifer from that flock of pretty girls, and I yanked her to the center just to dance them dreamy whirls. She laid her head upon my bosom in a loving sort of way, and we drifted into heaven as the band began to play, and I could feel my neck a-burning from her nose's breathing heat as she do-si-doed around me half the time upon my feet. She peered up in my blinkers in a soul-dissolving glance, quite conducive to the pleasures of a high-toned dance. Now every nerve just got to jingling to that music of delight as I hugged that little sage hen, uncomfortably tight. But she never made a beller, and the glances of her eyes seemed to thank me for the pleasures of a genuine surprise. She snuggled up against me in a loving sort of way, and we drifted into heaven as the band began to play. Tell you what, the joys of heaven ain't a cussed circumstance compared to the hugomania pleasures of a high-toned dance. Now when they struck that old cotillion of that music bill of fare, every bit of devil in me seemed to take it on a tear. I let out a cowboy war whoop, started in a rag, and I caught him with my trotters till the floor began to sag. And then my partner, she got seasick, staggered for a seat, and I balanced to the next one, but she dodged me slick and neat. Tell you what, I pulled the creases from my go-to-meeting pants when I put the cowboy trimmings on that high-toned dance. Thank you. There has been in the last 20 years, of course, 25, 30 years, a resurgence of cowboy poetry, and it's really, the Western Music Association is very much involved in that. But that's always been the case. Cowboy poetry goes back 150 years, probably even further than that. And it gets made into music, obviously, or sometimes it'll just stay as a poem. This song is, I'm going to do for you, is from the 1890s. And we know who wrote it. It's in the tradition, but we know who wrote it. A guy named D.J. O'Malley wrote it. He was a Montana cowboy. And he published this thing as a poem in the Montana Stockman in the 1890s. And it became a song, and it's just been passed around. And this has a lot of the aspects of what makes a good cowboy tune. You can go ahead and take notes and just figure it out for yourself. But it's called When the Work's All Done This Fall. Jolly cowboys were discussing plans at ease. One, I'll tell you something, if you will listen, please. I am an old cowpuncher, though here I'm dressed in rags. Used to be a tough one and take on great big jags. I have got a home, boys, a good one, you all know. Though I have not seen it as long, long ago. I'm going back to Dixie once more to see them all. Going back to see my mother when the work's all done this fall. After the roundup's over and after the shipping's done, going right straight home, boys, or all my money's gone. Mother's heart is breaking for me, that's all. With God's help I'll see her when the work's all done this fall. The very night this cowboy went out to stand his guard. The weather, it was stormy, raining very hard. The cattle, they got frightened and they rushed in wild stampede. The cowboy tried to head them while riding at full speed, while riding through the darkness. Oh, loudly he did shout, trying his best to head them and turn the herd about. The saddled pony stumbled and on him did fall, and he'll not see his mother when the work's all done this fall. Now he was so badly mangled, we thought he was dead. Picked him up so gently, we laid him on his bed. And opening wide his blue eyes and looking all around, motioned to his comrades to near him on the ground. I want you to send my mother the wages I have earned. For I'm afraid, boys, my last year I have turned. I'm going to a new land, I hear my master's call, and I'll not see my mother when the work's all done this fall. Pete, you can have my pistol, and Jake, you can take my bed, but you can have my saddle after I am dead. Think upon me kindly as you gaze upon them all, and give my love to mother when the work's all done this fall. Charlie died that morning. No tombstone at his head. There was nothing but a little board. This is what it read. Charlie died this morning, he died from a fall, and he'll not see his mother when the work's all done this fall. Thank you. I had both a cowboy music mentor whose name was Glenn Orland, but I also had a regular cowboy mentor whose name was Art Miller. And Art was pretty elderly, and he used to come and watch me ride colts in the Flint Hills of Kansas, and he had the coolest pickup truck ever made, a 1958 Chevy short bed step side 4-wheel drive. Indestructible, completely indestructible. He'd drive it out, right out to the corral, open the door, and then he'd watch me. And I figured I was doing something right because he didn't say anything, you know. And Art was fond of sayings, you know, pithy sayings. And he told me one time, he said, Steve, don't be afraid to take the bull by the horns. And then when no one was listening, he'd whisper to me, he'd say, just make sure it's a really tiny bull. Was in the year of 80 working under Silver Jack, which the same as now's in Jackson ain't soon expected back. There was a fellow there among us by the name of Robert Waite, kinda cute and kinda tonguey, guess he was a graduate. Now we could talk on any subject from the Bible down to Hoyle, and the words flowed out so easy, just as smooth and slick as oil. He was what they called a skeptic, and he allowed to sit and weave highfalutin words, telling just what he didn't believe. And after riding one Sunday, we're all sitting round, smoking on tobacco and hearing Bob expound. Well, hell, he said, was humbug, and he made it plain as day that the Bible was a fable, and we allowed it to look that way. Now these miracles and such like were too rank for him to stand. And as for him they called the Savior, he was just a common man. You're a liar, someone shouted, and you've got to take it back. Everybody started, 'twas the words of Silver Jack. Well, he cracked his fist together and he stacked his duds and cried, it was in that there religion that my mother lived and died. And though I ain't exactly always used the Lord just right, when I hear some chump abuse him, he must eat his words or fight. Well, Bob weren't no coward, and he spoke up bold and free. Stack your duds and cut your capers, 'cause there ain't no flies on me. And they fought for 40 minutes, and the crowd would up and cheer when Jack spit up a tooth or two and Bob lost his ear. Straightway Jack got him under and slugged him once or twice. Bob admitted the divinity of Christ, but Jack just kept on reasoning till the poor cuss gave a yell and allowed he'd been mistaken on his views concerning hell. Then the fierce encounter ended and they rose up from the ground. And someone found a bottle and we kindly passed it round. We drank to Bob's religion in a cheerful sort of way, but the spread of infidelity was checked in camp that day. Thank you. Now, this is a song about a fad called bicycle riding. In the late 19th century, up till about 1877, to give you an exact year, if you rode a bicycle, you were half crazy and you took your life in your hands. I don't even ever seen pictures of these things, but the front wheel would be 4 or 4.5 feet tall, and the rear wheel would be maybe 18 inches, and it took a fair amount of athletic ability to get in one. And they would race these things. I have a book of a guy that rode one of those dangerous things across the United States in 1875, apparently not having a hell of a lot to do, you know. But along comes the safety bicycle. Both front and rear wheel look the same. And so it's a big craze, you know, by the turn of the last century, by 1900, you know, bicycle riding all over the place, races and stuff. Well, cowboys are not immune to fads, resistant, but not immune. So some wag wrote a song about trying to ride a bicycle. I can ride the wildest Bronco in the wild and woolly west. I can break him, let him do his level best. Can handle any cattle, ever wore a coat of hair, and I had a lively tussle with the turtle grizzly bear. I can rope and tie a longhorn of the wildest Texas branded. Indian disagreements can take a leading hand. But I finally met my master. Really made me squeal when the boys got me astraddle the gall darn wheel. Was a tenderfoot who brought it as he was on his way from this land of freedom out to San Francisco Bay. Tied it at the ranch house outside to get a meal, never dreaming that his cowboys would monkey with his wheel. And there was Arizona, and there was Jack McGill. They said that I was bragging way too much about my skill. They said I'd find myself against a different kind of deal if I would get a straddle of that gall darn wheel. Such a slam against my talent made me madder than a mink, and I swore that I would ride it for amusement or for chink, that it was just a plaything for the kids and such about, and they'd have their ideas shattered, they'd lead the critter out. They held it while I mounted, and I gave the word to go. The push they gave to start me weren't unreasonably slow. But I never spilled a cuss word, and I never give a squeal. I was building reputation on that gall darn wheel. Now the grade was mighty sloping from the ranch down to the creek as I went galley fluting like a crazy lightning streak, just whizzing and darting first this way and then that. The darn contrivance wobbling like the flying of a bat. I pulled up on the handles, but I couldn't check it up. I jerked and yanked and hollered, but the darn thing wouldn't stop. Then a sort of meechin' in my brain began to steal that the devil had a mortgage on that gol darn wheel. Now I've a sort of dim and hazy remembrance of the stop with the world a spinning round and the stars all tangled up, and came an intermission that lasted till I found that I was in the bunkhouse with the boys all gathered round. And the doctor was sewing on the skin where it was ripped. Old Arizona whispered, "Well, oh boy, I guess you're whipped." I said that I am busted from sombrero down to heel. He grinned and said, "You ought to see that gol darn wheel." So I got to thinking about some ideas about a song. I write things occasionally, and I got to thinking about quicksand. There's an exciting thought, isn't it? Quicksand, and then horses, and I thought, well, what can you think up since you've had experience with horses and quicksand? By the way, I have helped pull out a number of animals from quicksand, and Hollywood has it all wrong. It doesn't swallow an animal. Quicksand just takes a horse down, or a cow down to their belly. And if you don't get them out, of course, then they're coyote bait. But, it's not going to swallow them in 2 minutes, like on the screen. It doesn't do that. It's just embarrassing for the cow, too. Just. Guess you won't have a calf this year, will you? Anyway, and I used to own a Hancock horse out of a stud horse in Oklahoma a long time ago named Joe Hancock. And the Hancock lineage is a popular ranch horse lineage in North Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. And I had one. And the horse I never did have, I always did want one, was a Dock Bar, the great cutting horse lineage. Dock Bars are like Ferraris with 4 legs, they're amazing horses. Anyway, so now you know the identification stuff. Ask my love, take a ride down by the sunny side with my Dock Bar colt and her Hancock mare. I aim to ask her for and so fair. Only say you'll be mine as we ride along the Rio Grande, and our love it will entwine as we cinch up along the Rio Grande. And as we rode, my Dock Bar colt pranced and danced, stepped too close in the quicksand there in a little moat. He struggled hard, but he could not float. Only say you'll be mine as we ride along the Rio Grande, and our love will entwine as we cinch up along the Rio Grande. She grabbed her rope, she played it out, swung it hard, she brought it down on the saddle horn. She dallied round, she pulled us out on the solid ground, and only say you'll be mine as we ride along the Rio Grande. And our love, it will entwine as we cinch up along the Rio Grande. One grateful guy, one roping gal, one tired colt, one winded mare, pledged their love forevermore along the sandy Rio Grande River shore. Only say you'll be mine as we ride along the Rio Grande, and our love, it will entwine as we cinch up along the Rio Grande. We cinch up on the Rio Grande. Thank you. My favorite time historically rodeo is up to the Second World War, basically between the First and Second World War, because that's when the rodeos we recognize it today got codified, for better or worse. Before the First World War, if you rode a bucking horse, you rode it till it stopped bucking. There's a real famous example at the Cheyenne Roundup, 1907. A guy named Dick Stanley rode steamboat for 2 minutes, not 8 seconds. That's all. That's what you do today. But in 2 minutes, he was so exhausted the horse stopped bucking, right? So they had to help him off the horse, and then another guy rode for the same length of time and got the same score. So Stanley's got to get back on a bucking horse. They had to literally pile him on. And he won, but had he waited 30 years, he'd only would have had to ride for 8 years. And of course, women were a big part of rodeo. Today, they're restricted to barrel racing. And but before the First World War, they did everything: bronc riding, roping, trick riding, Roman racing. There was a crazy event, riding 2 horses around a oval. You want your left foot on the left horse, right foot on the right horse. Good God, what would happen if one horse decides to go to Seattle and the other horse decides to go to Chicago? I mean, you've got trouble there. I mean, they're tied together, but still, it's dangerous as hell. You're doing 35 miles an hour. My favorite rodeo champion of that era is a woman named Prairie Rose Henderson. And she was one of the best, period, right? She won the bronc riding at Cheyenne Roundup in 1917, and they gave her a silver buckle. The Union Pacific Railroad sponsored that event that year, and she got a silver buckle, which she wore. And she was daring. She was really daring. Do you know that you could see Prairie Rose Henderson's calves? You could see Prairie Rose Henderson's calves. Well, in 1915, that's 1920. That's daring, you know. And as great a horse person as she was an absolutely atrocious judge of men. Just terrible. And she hooked up with a guy named Charlie Coleman. And I'm trying to be polite here, I really am. He's just a bum. He was a horse thief. And what made it worse was he wasn't any good at it. He just kept getting caught. And I'll leave it at that. This is about Prairie Rose Henderson. Prairie Rose, never let the sun go down. Prairie Rose, always let it shine. She dressed like someone in a Broadway show, and she rode like someone on the lam. Prairie Rose rode as well as any man, wore her silver buckle from Cheyenne, racing around the track, trick riding on her back. Prairie Rose, she rode just like breathing. Now, why can't men be more like horses? Willful but loyal to a fault. Why was Charlie such a low-down cattle thief? And why was Charlie always getting caught? Prairie Rose rode as well as any man, for her silver buckle from Cheyenne, racing around the track, trick riding on her back. She rode just like breathing. One more time, Charlie got arrested. One more time, Charlie went to jail. Coming home, Prairie Rose was missing. Charlie figured she'd up and hit the trail. Prairie Rose rode as well as any man, wore her silver buckle from Cheyenne, racing around the track, trick riding on her back. She rode just like breathing. Well, they found her 7 years later with a halter clutched tightly in her hand, hunting a stray horse in a blizzard. Brought this trick rider to her end. Prairie rode as well as any man, wore her silver buckle from Cheyenne, racing around the track, trick riding on her back. She rode just like breathing. Oh, she rode like breathing. Breathing. Thank you. I'm going to finish up with a tune by a guy by the name of Nicholas Lopez. That Nicholas Lopez was a vaquero farmer. And in 1940, he was interviewed by a guy who worked for the Works Progress Administration, the Franklin Roosevelt Works Progress Administration. And for those of you who don't know what the WPA was, it was a program that, with federal money, employed artists and writers and singers and dancers and musicians and actors that go around the United States and do just that, painters. Many a mural in a county seat dates from the WPA. They painted thousands of them. Well, writers came to New Mexico as well, and an anonymous writer interviewed Nicholas Lopez, who was about 80 at the time. We don't know who did the interview. He asked him, he says, what was life like when you were young? And Lopez said, oh, we had all the water we needed. There wasn't any water companies, you know. And said, my dad made me quit school to be a vaquero, but I took a book with me because I wasn't going to be illiterate. So he's herding cattle out on the Rio Puerco with a book. Comes home after the summer with the cattle, and his dad looks at him and says, you look like a buffalo, go get a haircut. Lopez also said they used to grow sugar cane on the Rio Grande, something I didn't know. And they'd have sugarins, you know, when they crushed the sugar. They'd have dances on a Saturday night, and Antonio Dominguez, who was a Pueblo fiddler, would come and play for these dances. And the children would and they had these huge pestle and mortar things that would go like this and smash the sugar cane. And children would ride on those beams, you know, those big, huge beams. Throughout the interview, Lopez kept saying, todo pasa en este mundo, which, for those of you who are monolingual, is everything changes in the world. He was resigned to the fact that his childhood, what was in his childhood was no longer the case in 1940. Everything had changed. So he was resigned to it. So this is Nicholas Lopez's tune. When I was a niño in Agua Fria, we had all the water we'd need, and the willows grew on the Rio, up to Santa Fe. I tended me padre's cattle, from Los Tortillos to Arroyo Hondo. For a month I slept on my saddle, with my hair like a wild buffalo. Antonio Dominguez played a sweet violin long ago. For the dancers, all of the ranches, Toto Pasa, Este Mundo. How I love to be home. The presses were turning, and everyone brought in their cane, and the pestle fires were burning. Children, oh, they laughed on the beams, and oh, the were the best of the good times. Memories my spirit will hold. And as the syrup boiled out, we danced about. Wonderful stories were told. El Indio Antonio Dominguez played a sweet violin long ago. For the dancers from all of the ranches, Toto Pasa, Este Mundo. When I was young, we had all the water we'd need. Now the water companies, they take it away. And we grow our corn and our beans now, just by the grace of God's rain. I know that He knows what He's doing. Oh, everything that comes as it goes. And I'll live as I will die, beneath this same sky. Todo pasa, este mundo. El Indio Antonio Dominguez played a sweet violin long ago. For the dancers from all of the ranches, Toto Pasa, Este Mundo. Toto Pasa, Este Mundo.